Welcome to Synthesis and Sound Design. This week you're going to be putting together your abstract soundscape using the wind noise sounds and wobble. It could be a wobblescape, could be a windscape. We're going to expand upon the weekly assignments that we've been doing, and your first main assignment is going to be due this week, which is an abstract songscape, or more of an abstract soundscape. You do not need to use melody. This is not a conventional song. This is an abstract soundscape. If melody gurgles up somewhere and then melts into something else, yes, you could do that. But basically the idea of this is an abstraction. It's just washes of sound. Wind. Right now outside the wind is blowing and I can hear it blowing different ways in different spaces around my house. So that's the idea. You're going to create this spacious windscape, wobblescape. You can put things around the stereo spectrum, pan things out in different directions, and change the EQ, sweep the EQ as I showed you in a demo, and I'll show you in another demo today. Put something off to one side and sweep the EQ. It sounds very much like distant wind or the distant rolling of waves. Well, that's the idea behind this week's soundscape. Topic this week is Thaddeus Cahill, an inventor and a dreamer. Young Thaddeus, a lawyer. I think he might have even been a patent lawyer. A lawyer, nonetheless, who could pull apart and rebuild typewriters. A tinkerer, a thinkerer. So anyway, he may have invented what could be considered the first synthesizer. Depending on if you define synthesizers as needing electricity, because the Greeks had like ancient organums, things, pedal instruments, keyboard instruments filled with tubes of water that would generate sound. That might be the original synthesizer, but it really depends on how you define a synthesizer. Something synthesizes sound. A log drum, an ancient log drum, is that a synthesizer? And the way you touch it and muffle it and change it. It has resonance, it has oscillation, and then you're filtering it. That's pretty much subtractive synthesis. So it really depends on how we define synthesis if we determine that Thaddeus Cahill's machine was the first synthesizer or not. Thaddeus Cahill, in 1897, invents this giant tone wheel synthesizer. Massive, like battleship size. They built it in Holyoke, Mass, and then they ship it down to New York City on barges. And in 1906, they set up the Telharmonium Hall. The name of this device is the Telharmonium. The name of this little lecture is Thaddeus Cahill and the Telharmonium. Remember that for the final. Thaddeus Cahill, Telharmonium. So he sets it up on Broadway in New York City, 39th and Broadway, across from the New York Opera House in 1906 in a place called Telharmonic Hall. And his idea for this is to have this device pump sound out over the phone lines and sell music to places via subscription, an electronic subscription service. Does it sound Netflix familiar? So anyway, he does this, and he needed giant power at the source. There wasn't the same kind of at-source amplification that we have today. Every telephone, every guitar amplifier, every computer has little amps that are amplifying the sound. But back then, the system didn't work that way, and they needed a tremendous amount of power at the beginning. It was essentially a power plant to pump out this sound to the listeners. So a couple problems. One is that radio was being born, and radio would eventually spell the death knell for the Telharmonium. Not only that, but he would be pumping out sound over the phone lines, and via some glitches, the music of the Telharmonium would interrupt the telephone calls of New York. So you can imagine some banker, some broker down in Lower Manhattan doing a deal, buy, sell, buy, collaborate, corruptorate, right? Doing their business and trying to get a deal done, and all of a sudden into the phone conversation, this kind of squonky organ sound interrupts So that wasn't going to last very long in Manhattan. And of course, we know at various points, 90-something% of the world's financial transactions are taking place in Lower Manhattan. I don't know if that's still true, but at one point, tremendous amount of the world financial system was running out of Lower Manhattan. So we couldn't have that being interrupted by the Telharmonium. So in 1914, Thaddeus Cahill is bankrupt, and he dies in 1934, thinking he had failed. But in fact, his tone wheel system, now with proper amplification, could be miniaturized into smaller tone wheels that would fit in a portable device, and hence the B3 organ was born. Of course, the black churches of the South would buy these B3 organs because they didn't have the bread that the giant freaking pipe organ Northern Protestant churches had. So the B3 organ becomes the sound of the church in the South. And of course, it's only one step from there until you get to Brother Jack McDuff and Jimmy Smith and Philadelphia and the organ, that delicious, greasy B3 organ sound, which comes direct from Thaddeus Cahill. So R.I.P. Thaddeus Cahill. Thaddeus, you did not fail. In fact, you succeeded and gave us a delicious sonic palette, which will now last forever. If you listen to any organ trios now, Martin Medeski and Wood, Vorja here in town with Ray Pashikowski, Soul Live, that's the sound of the B3. That skronking, grooving, funkin' organ sound that's a delicious taste underneath. You want to add some instant soul, drop that B3 in there, right? But before the B3, there was the Telharmonium. R.I.P. Thaddeus Cahill.